Dr. Kelren thought he was walking into a mass casualty zone. Bodies lay across the sand, motionless, their pale flesh turning shades of red and bronze under the twin suns of Theta 9. His radiation alarms shrieked the moment he stepped off the shuttle, readings spiking high enough to sterilize an Ethician colony in seconds. He sprinted forward, medical kit in hand, shouting into his comm, "We have fatalities, surface burns, possibly heat stroke." One of the corpses groaned, lifted her head, and squinted at him through tinted lenses. "Buddy, you're blocking the sun." Kelren froze mid-step. "You're alive?" She yawned. "Barely. 5 more minutes." Another human rolled over beside her, skin sizzling faintly. "Don't forget my back this time, Jess." Kelren's translator struggled to keep up. "Back? You require spinal treatment?" Jess chuckled. "Nah, tan lines, gotta even it out." The medic blinked, horrified. "You are deliberately exposing yourselves to lethal stellar radiation?" A third voice, deeper, amused, came from behind a pair of dark glasses. "Relax, Doc. It's called tanning." Kelren's brain stalled. "You burn yourselves recreationally?" "Only on weekends," the man said, smirking. The medic's suit filters kicked into overdrive. He could feel the heat even through the insulation. The humans, meanwhile, were laughing, drinking something cold, and debating who had the better base layer. Kelren's hand trembled over his scanner. Every instinct screamed that this was death by stupidity, but the readings were worse than that. They weren't dying, their bodies were adapting. He whispered, "You're insane." The man tipped his sunglasses down. "Nah, we're from Earth." It was 42 degrees Celsius in the shade, assuming you could find any. Most of the colony was flat, sand-bleached rock, and windless. No flora, no fauna. A purely mineral operation, leased jointly by the Terran Collective and the Ethisian Empire. For Ethisians like Kelren, it was listed as a Class V hazard world. For humans, it was a good spot for lunch. Lieutenant Alan Torres, the colony's senior human officer, arrived not long after. His forearms were already burnt to a deep brown. He was holding a hydration pouch and a plastic chair under one arm. "New doc?" he asked. Kelren stood rigidly, his medkit now open on the ground, scanners flashing red warnings. "These humans are experiencing cellular trauma. They are overheating. One's hydration index is down 20%. The epidermal layer is compromised. This is systemic damage." Torres took a sip from his pouch. "That's a tan, Doc." Kelren twitched. "You are describing a medical emergency as recreational aesthetics?" The lieutenant shrugged. "Pretty much. Gives you that golden glow. And vitamin D. And stress reduction. By burning yourself?" Jess lifted one arm, inspecting the slight redness. "This isn't even bad. You should have seen Greg last week. Looked like a tomato." Kelren reeled. He activated the external cooling units on his suit and checked his own exposure warnings again. His biofilter estimated he could remain on the surface for 2 more minutes before microblistering began on his neck spines. "You cannot remain out here like this," he said. "Your skin is suffering UV degradation. You're cooking." Another man, lying face down with a small speaker playing jazz near his head, muttered, "That's the point." Kelren turned to Torres. "How long have they been out here?" Torres looked at the sky. "About 90 minutes. We do it on rotation." "Rotation?" 30 on, 5 off. Rotate hydration and oil reapplication. Kelren glanced back at the group. "Oil?" Jess held up a small bottle. "Sunscreen. SPF 70. That's how you keep it from going nuclear. Want some?" He stumbled backward. "You coat yourselves in chemicals to prolong your exposure to harmful radiation?" "Exactly," Torres said. "Protects the skin long enough to build melanin." Kelren pulled up the compound breakdown on his scanner. His eyes widened as he saw the ingredients. "This is particulate shielding, organic film with UV filters. You invented armor for your skin." "We invented a lot of stuff, aloe vera too, great for aftercare." Kelren crouched beside one of the sunbathers, ignoring his own rising heat stress. He ran a deeper scan. The readings showed inflammation at the dermis level, increased blood flow, protein heat shock markers, and early signs of sun-induced DNA damage. Yet alongside it, upregulated melanin synthesis, cellular reinforcement, and minor tissue adaptation. "You're rebuilding your skin by destroying it," he said. The man next to him grinned. "That's how we do it." Kelren stared. "That is not how anyone does it." A gust of hot wind blew across the colony plateau, stirring the sand like glass particles. Kelren's sensors crackled in warning. UV intensity was rising again. "New flare coming in," Torres noted, glancing at a handheld monitor. Kelren's panic spiked. "A solar flare? Everyone needs to get inside. Now." Jess reached into her cooler, pulled out a cold canister, and rolled it across her neck. "Nah, this one's small, just boosts the tan." The alarm started whining on Kelren's suit. "This is not a controlled exposure. You are at risk of radiation burns, cellular necrosis, dehydration-induced delirium." The humans ignored him. They put on sunglasses. A few flipped onto their stomachs. One man cheered as the flare intensity peaked. "Yeah, baby. Solar sauna time." Kelren ran. He sprinted to the closest hardened shelter, suit filters screaming as the air temperature climbed by 3 more degrees. Inside, he collapsed against the wall, panting. Even his internal circulators couldn't keep up. He watched through the pressure-sealed viewport as the humans outside, now fully bathed in irradiated sunlight, lifted their drinks to the sky. The flare passed. The UV level dropped, the air cooled slightly. And they just stood up, stretching, groaning like they'd had a nice nap. Kelren whispered to himself, "You endure what would vaporize most sentience, and call it pleasant." Torres, now back inside and toweling off, looked at him and laughed. "Doc, you've got a lot to learn about humans." Kelren didn't reply. He simply stared at the sun, then at the humans, then at his own scanner. And for the first time, he wasn't sure if his medicine was meant for these creatures at all. Kelren spent the rest of that day trying to rationalize what he had seen. No logic could explain it. He sat in the medbay of the Theta-9 colony, staring at the scanner logs from earlier. The data repeated the same impossible pattern: epidermal damage concurrent with controlled adaptation. He enlarged the scans, hoping for a machine error. The tissue readings remained firm. There was inflammation, yes, redness, swelling, dehydration, but also increased protein resilience and cellular reinforcement. Their bodies had treated trauma as training. That night, as the suns dipped below the horizon and the surface cooled enough for most species to emerge, Kelren prepared for an influx of patients. Surely, now that the heat had subsided, the humans would begin arriving, blistered, vomiting, delirious. Instead, the doors stayed silent. He waited another hour before deciding to check the barracks. The human section was alive with laughter. Someone was grilling food over an open thermal plate. Others played cards. The same people who had been sprawled out in the desert looked healthier than before. Their skin glowed with a reddish-brown hue, their movements relaxed. Jess noticed him first. "Hey, Doc, you come to hang out?" Kelren blinked at her. "You should be in bed under IV rehydration. All of you suffered severe radiation exposure." Torres leaned against a support beam, drink in hand. "You worry too much. We're fine." The medic's frills twitched. "Fine? Your outer dermal layer shows multiple microlesions. Your internal temperature exceeded safe limits for over 20 minutes. Jess grinned. "Exactly. Sauna and sun combo. We're all detoxed." He stared. "You believe cellular apoptosis is a method of cleansing?" Torres nodded toward one of the men across the table. "Ask Greg. He peeled like a snake last week and now look at him. Darker skin, no burns." Kelren approached Greg reluctantly. The man held out an arm. The skin indeed looked thicker, darker, the underlying tissue strong. Kelren ran a handheld dermal scanner over it. The readings made no sense. Melanin density had tripled. UV penetration dropped by over 70% compared to his earlier baseline. Kelren whispered, "You burned yourself stronger." Greg laughed. "Guess so, built-in SPF." "This isn't evolution," Kelren muttered. "This is deliberate cell destruction followed by accelerated regeneration. Your body uses pain as stimulus." Pretty much everything we do works that way, Torres said. Muscle training, cold immersion, spicy food, tattoos. We toughen by testing limits. Kelren's voice rose in disbelief. Spicy food? You deliberately ingest chemical irritants as a challenge? Jess leaned forward. You've never had jalapenos? I don't know what that is, and I don't want to. They all laughed. Kelren felt his exoskeletal plates tighten with unease. The laughter didn't sound reckless. It sounded comfortable, familiar, as if they had long accepted that survival was supposed to hurt a little. He checked his chrono. You will report to the infirmary tomorrow for full scans, no exceptions. Torres raised a hand in mock surrender. Sure thing, Doc, after breakfast. Breakfast? Yeah. We're doing outdoor eggs and coffee. Sunrise roast. Kelren could barely believe it. You plan to go back outside during peak UV intensity? Jess smiled. Of course, gotta maintain the tan. The next morning, at 0700 local time, Kelren found them again in the dunes. This time, they had umbrellas, a large music speaker, and something that smelled like cooked animal fat. They were laughing, arguing about who got to flip the bacon. Kelren clutched his datapad like a shield. You are aware the surface temperature is already 43 degrees Celsius? Torres flipped a strip of meat with a spatula. Perfect frying weather. You're frying yourselves. Relax, we've got sunscreen, SPF 100. Kelren's voice cracked. That is not a medical number. Jess reclined in a folding chair, face tilted to the rising sun. You stress too much, Doc. Come sit. We'll get you a hat. Kelren's translator hesitated on the word hat, unsure whether it meant armor or ritual head covering. Before he could ask, something blared through his comm channel. Radiation alert. A minor solar flare was approaching again. Shelter, now, he shouted, grabbing for Torres's arm. Torres pulled away calmly. That one's small. We'll be fine. Kelren turned on his scanner. UV levels were spiking fast. His armor registered a warning for imminent surface, blistering. He felt the heat through 3 layers of reflective plating. The humans didn't move. They just squinted behind their sunglasses and raised their drinks. Too sunshine. Kelren could barely breathe from panic. You are bathing in radiation levels that would melt my epidermal proteins. Torres grinned. Don't worry, we've got hydration and shades. He stumbled back toward the rover, clutching his chest vents, his vision hazing from heat shimmer. By the time he reached the doorway, the flare had passed. He turned and saw them still sitting, relaxed, shimmering under the dying light. No panic, no pain, just satisfaction. Later that afternoon, when temperatures dropped to survivable levels, Kelren summoned them to the medbay. Every single one came, cheerful and unbothered. He insisted on complete dermal and systemic scans. The readings were stunning. Cell turnover was heightened. Heat shock proteins molecules that prevent cellular collapse under stress were off the charts. Melanin pathways had fully activated, covering previous lesions. Even microvascular flow improved, likely from repeated dilation under heat. Their injuries weren't just healing, they were improving tissue resilience. Kelren muttered as he checked another data point. This should take days, you did it in hours. Jess watched him work. So, we're healthy? Healthy is not the word I would use, Kelren said slowly. You're functional and inexplicably stable. Torres patted his shoulder, leaving a sweaty handprint on the sterilized armor. Told you, little sunshine never killed anyone. Kelren turned to him sharply. That statement is medically false. Torres smiled. Fine, almost no one. That night, Kelren stayed in the lab, unable to sleep. He reviewed historical Earth data downloaded from the colony archives. The more he read, the more his unease deepened. There were records of humans exposing themselves to freezing water to build circulation, to weights so heavy they tore muscle fibers, to poisons in tiny doses to develop tolerance. Everywhere he looked, humans invited damage as practice. He closed the file, rubbing his temples. They condition themselves through pain. Their recreation is stress. The station lights dimmed automatically for night cycle. Outside, across the viewport, he saw a faint glow on the sand. 3 humans under the fading suns, still laughing, still unafraid. Kel-Ren whispered into the empty lab, "You don't survive the universe, you wrestle it for sport." He didn't realize the heat alarms had already reset for morning. The next week began with disaster. At 0942 local colony time, a containment alarm wailed from the power station buried beneath the ridge. A low-frequency tremor rolled across the desert floor. Kel-Ren, already mid-check on blood work from his latest bafflingly stable human patient, nearly dropped the sample. Containment breach. Reactor coolant system compromised. The automated voice repeated in multiple dialects. Kel-Ren lunged for the emergency console, skimming the alert codes. Radiation leak. Minor at first glance, but enough to trigger lockdown for most species. Non-humanoid personnel had already begun evacuation protocols. He opened his comms. Kel-Ren to all field teams. Medical priority Alpha. Get inside. Radiation containment failure. This is not a drill. No reply came from the power station. Kel-Ren to Lieutenant Torres, he said again. Are you receiving? Respond. Still, nothing. He grabbed his kit, keyed the shelter doors, and bolted across the rock-scoured path toward the ridge. By the time he reached the station perimeter, the air shimmered with rising heat. Radiation sensors pinned at borderline critical. A wave of nausea pulsed in his stomach from the ambient energy. He found the entrance open. And the humans inside. Torres, shirt damp with sweat and stained with grease, was hunched over a coolant manifold. Another Marine named Adam held a pipe clamp with bare hands, gritting his teeth as the metal steamed under pressure. 2 more moved between consoles, rerouting flow systems and stabilizing core readouts. None of them wore protective gear. Kel-Ren stared. What are you doing? Torres barely glanced back. Patch job. One of the coolant lines burst. Couldn't afford to wait for suits. You'll suffer acute radiation damage. Not if we keep the leak below threshold, Adam said through clenched teeth. And if we're fast. Kel-Ren stepped forward, screaming over the roar of the failing fans. You are unshielded. That flare exposure earlier already compromised your dermal layers. You're stacking trauma. Jess, working a relay console, wiped her forehead with the back of her wrist. No time to argue. Power to the medbay runs through here. Kel-Ren's brain threatened to lock up. The temperature inside the reactor room was nearing 50 degrees Celsius. UV leakage was still active. His suit filters couldn't keep up. His vision blurred slightly from dehydration. The humans moved like they were in a gym. Within minutes, the readings stabilized. The core dropped to safe temperature. The alarms fell silent. The humans, filthy and radiant with sweat, emerged from the tunnel like nothing had happened. Their skin flushed red, their clothes scorched in places. But they were upright, alert, alive. Kel-Ren staggered into the medbay ahead of them and activated 3 high-pressure hydration stations. He fully expected to treat burns, nausea, possibly organ strain. Instead, they laughed as they rinsed off and grabbed rehydration salts. Jess leaned back in the clinic chair. Radiation was mostly gamma, low dose, nothing a few liters of water and a nap can't fix. Kel-Ren stared. That is not how ionizing radiation works. Your machines are set for your species, Torres said. We've got higher thresholds, plus the melanin helps. Kel-Ren froze. He scanned Torres immediately. The results made his breath catch. The skin barrier had changed again. Where sun exposure had triggered melanin production the week before, this new layer, deeper, more dense, was beginning to reflect part of the incoming spectrum. The cells weren't just absorbing radiation, they were redirecting it, like a flexible shield. He ran the scan again, same result. You are developing natural radiation deflection? He asked. Dunno, Torres said. Might just be the tan. Kel-Ren checked Adam and Jess, both showed the same markers. Secondary tissue thickening, UV reflectivity elevated, no sign of systemic inflammation, no lymphatic stress. Their bodies were not only surviving the environment, they were modifying to master it. Kel-Ren sat down on the edge of the medbed. He felt lightheaded, though his vitals were normal. The room spun gently, a slow realization pushing through the fog. You adapt through injury, he thought again. You push against death to find where it bends. He pulled up Earth's physiological archives once more, cross-referenced terms, radiation, trauma conditioning, environmental stress. He searched historical techniques, pain tolerance training, firewalking, exposure therapy, hormetic stress models. Everything pointed to the same conclusion. Where other species evolved to avoid pain, humans pursued it in measured doses, as if pain was a tool, a guide, a signal that could be used rather than feared. He looked up at the trio in front of him, now joking about the heat like it had been a casual inconvenience. "You weren't lucky," he said aloud. "You were ready." Torres tossed him a bottle of electrolyte water. "You'll get used to us eventually, Doc." "No," Kelren replied slowly. "I do not think I will." Later that night, as the twin suns dipped beneath the horizon and the colony lights blinked on in their cool, artificial glow, Kelren returned to his quarters and submitted an update to the Ethician Medical Council. Subject: Homo sapiens, Terran. Environmental adaptation behavior. Note: species exhibits controlled stress exposure as a method of physiological adaptation. Deliberate damage used to enhance resistance. Recommend observation from a secure distance. He hesitated before closing the file. His eyes drifted to the dark glass window where he could see the faint outline of humans sitting outside again. Their legs up, skin still pink. Their bodies resting, but only just. One of them raised a bottle toward the sky and called, "Good sunset, huh?" Kelren didn't answer. He was already wondering what would happen if they stayed here longer. If the radiation kept rising. If the air grew hotter. Would they simply adjust? Would their skin turn to armor? Would they grow fireproof? His frills twitched. Perhaps they already had. The next morning began with static in Kelren's calm implant. He sat up from his cot, his joints still sore from the prior day's heat exposure. Even with the filtered walls of his quarters and a constant microclimate generator, Theta 9 pressed in like a slow, patient predator. The desert didn't roar, it hummed. A low, omnipresent pulse of energy and heat and light that wormed its way into every surface. Static again, then a clear signal. "Doc, you up?" It was Torres. "I am now," Kelren answered, still blinking away sleep. "Is there an emergency?" "Sort of. We've got a visiting Ethesian diplomat arriving today. She's sensitive to UV. High-priority transport detail. We're handling surface logistics. Thought you might want to brief her yourself. Show her where the shade is." Kelren blinked. "And what are you doing?" "Digging out the picnic gear." The signal ended before Kelren could respond. By the time he arrived at the landing platform, the scene was worse than he expected. Torres and 4 other humans were setting up a shade tent made of woven mineral fiber, high reflectivity, open on all sides. A table sat in the middle, covered with bottles, sunscreen, a fruit bowl, and a fan. Kelren marched straight up to him. "This is a diplomatic reception. Why is there melon?" Torres adjusted his sunglasses. "Hydration. And it's mango. Thought she'd like something refreshing. You built a reflective canopy in a Class V radiation zone for a species that suffers protein denaturation in direct sunlight. Which is why we added the fan." Kelren's neck spines bristled. "This is reckless." Torres shrugged. "It's practical." Before Kelren could argue further, the shuttle came in low, kicking up dust in a sharp spiral. The diplomat stepped out, Ambassador Theva, a senior representative of the Ethician core worlds. She was encased in a full-body cloak, 3 layers of shielding, her breathing labored despite the portable filter unit slung across her back. She made it 10 steps before the heat overwhelmed her. Even through the suit, her knees wobbled. Torres caught her by the arm. "Easy," he said. "Shades this way." She hesitated. "The temperature? 46. Got a fan running, plus extra coolant packs if you need 'em." Theva turned to Kelren as they seated her. "Is this standard procedure for your colony?" Kelren opened his mouth, closed it. "It is standard for humans." Torres handed her a hydration bottle wrapped in a cold sleeve. "Filtered electrolytes. We use it after tanning." Theva glanced at the bottle, then back at Kelren. "Tanning?" The word had never sounded more like a diagnosis. Kelren gave her a measured nod. They expose themselves to solar radiation deliberately, for reasons ranging from aesthetics to psychological benefit. Her jaw twitched behind the suit. They bask in radiation? On purpose? Frequently. She slowly turned her gaze toward Torres, who was applying a fresh coat of sunscreen to his forearms. He didn't seem to notice the scrutiny. After a long silence, Thava murmured, "And they do not perish?" Kelren sighed. "They flourish." Later, after the ambassador returned to the shuttle with her diplomatic notes and a mango in hand, Kelren ran another routine scan on the humans, curious if the week's exposure had triggered any new responses. The answer was yes. Torres now exhibited subtle shifts in his skin barrier composition. Not just melanin density, his upper dermis now showed altered protein sequences, slight cross-linking between collagen strands. Not scar tissue. Something else, something tougher. Kelren activated a deeper scan. The data came back slowly. Molecular reinforcement. Structural proteins adapting to repetitive UV stress. Not armor, but preparation. He checked the others. The results were similar. Slightly different in each, but all pointed to the same truth. The skin wasn't just getting darker, it was learning. Kelren sat at the medbay terminal for a long time. Eventually, he opened a private file. Field note, subject species, Homo sapiens. Observation. Evidence suggests that repeated environmental damage results in controlled adaptation across multiple biological systems. Cellular damage used as input for structural optimization. Hypothesis. Stress exposure is not only tolerated, it is biologically integrated as an evolutionary stimulus. He hesitated, then added one more line. Potential risk factor. No observable ceiling on tolerable stress before adaptation. Limits unknown. That night, as temperatures dropped and the red sand cooled to something close to livable, Kelren walked past the edge of the HAB zone. He spotted Torres and Jess reclined on the dune's crest, drinks in hand, their silhouettes black against the stars. They were not training, they were not fighting, they were simply watching. As if the fire they endured by day meant nothing at all once night came. Kelren stood for a moment, unsure whether to speak. Jess looked back first. "You ever gonna join us, Doc?" "I do not think I would survive the experience." Torres raised his drink. "Neither did we, at first." Kelren didn't smile, but he sat down beside them. Not close, just close enough to feel the edge of the heat radiating from their sun-hardened skin. He didn't remove his helmet. But he didn't leave, either. Kelren had spent 33 local cycles on Theta 9. He had cataloged 16 distinct forms of heat-induced dermal adaptation among the human personnel. He had observed 3 separate radiation spikes, 2 flare events, and 1 near-death dehydration case resolved not with emergency evacuation, but with ice chips and a long nap. And he still could not reconcile the data with what he saw. Today was supposed to be a routine medical check. Instead, Kelren found himself pacing the edge of the colony's new North Dome. It was still under construction, half its shielding panels exposed to direct solar radiation. The engineers had been delayed by a cargo mishap, one not caused by weather or accident, but by human behavior. Specifically, the humans had stopped construction during peak sun hours, not for safety, for sunbathing. Jess was there, lying on an insulation mat with her eyes closed, her water bottle within reach. She had a portable speaker playing music from Earth, something rhythmic and slow. Her skin was dark now, almost copper-toned, and the deeper layers showed increased cross-linking in the dermis. Torres sat nearby, sketching something into a notebook. A manual drawing, with actual graphite. His arms were darker than Kelren had seen on any human. They gleamed faintly with mineral oil, the kind used to trap heat evenly across the skin. Kelren stopped a few meters away. "You've halted your workday, again." Jess raised one hand lazily, waving toward the sun. "We're calibrating the tan. You're halting construction during critical daylight hours for aesthetic purposes." Torres looked up. "Think of it as active conditioning." "You're calling self-inflicted radiation damage conditioning?" He shrugged. "That's what it is, we're still adapting." Kelren moved closer, scanning both of them. "You've reached a cellular threshold I did not think possible. Your outer dermis now reflects nearly 12% of UVA and UVB radiation. And the damaged cells? They're being replaced faster than I can log them. Jess, your epidermal turnover rate has quadrupled since arrival. Jess smiled without opening her eyes. Yeah, got that new skin glow. This is not a glow, it's thermal armor. Torres tilted his head. You make it sound so dramatic. It is dramatic, Kelren snapped. Your species is evolving under stress conditions, in real time. Not over generations, over days. You're rewriting your biology with sunburns. Jess rolled over. You say that like it's a bad thing. Kelren took a deep breath through his filtration unit. It should be. The sun was reaching its zenith now. Kelren's suit temperature warning chirped softly. He ignored it. You have chosen to make pain part of your routine, he said. Not out of desperation, but preference. That confuses me. Torres set down his pencil. We're not chasing pain, Doc. We're just not afraid of it. Not if it teaches us something. Kelren looked up at the twin suns. They shimmered like blades in the sky, searing the air between them and the sand. You teach your skin to resist fire. You bathe in radiation to see how much you can take. You smile as your cells scream for repair. Jess cracked one eye open. Well, when you put it like that, it sounds intense. It is intense. You should be dead. Multiple times. Torres stood and stretched. Maybe, but we're not. We're better. The soreness fades. The tan stays. Kelren sat in the sand, heat pressing into his suit like a rising tide. Other species evolve to avoid death. You approach it like a training partner. Jess chuckled. Can't dodge it forever. Might as well get used to its face. Kelren didn't speak for a while. Eventually, Torres sat beside him, resting his arms on his knees. You ever hear the story of Icarus? Kelren shook his head. No. Old Earth myth, Torres said. A man built wings from wax and feathers. Flew too close to the sun. Burned. Fell. Kelren narrowed his eyes. Why fly toward it at all? Because we want to know how close we can get before we fall. The silence stretched between them. The sun did not relent. The colony behind them shimmered with heat mirage. Somewhere far off, the wind stirred, a slow spiral of dust across the plain. Then Kelren said, That's not curiosity, that's obsession. Torres smiled faintly. Sometimes they're the same thing. Later that evening, Kelren logged his final report for the cycle. Subject: Homo sapiens, Terran. Entry: Theta 9 Environmental Response Study. Summary: Subject species demonstrates unparalleled adaptive resilience in high radiation, high temperature environments. Repeated exposure to solar radiation results not in degradation, but in improved biological response. Enhanced melanin production, tissue regeneration, UV reflectivity. Additional note: adaptation is not passive, it is sought, encouraged, ritualized through acts referred to as tanning. Recommendation: future cross-species deployments should include psychological orientation for medical staff assigned to human colonies. Resistance to harm is not accidental, it is cultivated. Final assessment: Homo sapiens do not seek safety, they seek stress. To them, the sun is not a threat, it is a tool, a trial, a forge. He ended the file and stepped outside. Night had fallen, the dunes had cooled to survivable levels. The stars overhead burned silently, distant, steady. Torres and Jess sat at their usual spot, drinks in hand. A small fire crackled between them, casting soft shadows across the sand. Kelren approached. This time, he left his helmet behind. Torres saw him first. Well, look at that. You're out past curfew. Kelren sat slowly, the heat of the ground still rising through his suit. Only for a moment. Jess passed him a flask. Sip, not gulp. It's got electrolytes and lemon. He took it. The taste was bitter, sharp, refreshing. You know, Torres said, poking the fire, you could get used to this. Might even tan a little. Kelren glanced at the flames, then at the stars, then back to the faces that had endured a sun he still feared. I believe I understand now, he said. You do not burn for pleasure. Jess grinned. No? No, Kelren said. You burn to remember you're still here. Torres raised his drink. Now you're getting it. And under a sky lit by stars that had watched 1,000 species cower from fire, 3 humans and 1 reluctant medic sat and drank the heat into their bones. The sun would rise again, and the humans would meet it with bare skin and open arms.